Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and welcome to my July 2019 horoscope report for you. It is my intention for this video to give you the information that I believe that you need to make this the best month possible and learn a little astrology while you're at it. Definitely go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com, where I have a very extensive astrology blog, including blogs on the new and full moons and how best to use those power periods. If you are interested in learning astrology and you resonate with how I teach, check out my astrology apprenticeship program, also at anniehelpsyou.com. Definitely check out my new book, that has become a beautiful bedside companion and purse-toting companion for my fellow spiritual seekers, an Amazon bestseller, Radical Prayer, Transform Your Life and the World in 28 Days. And you can see that at radicalprayerbook.com. So what do we have in store for you this month? I'm going to go into lots of details. Let's check them out now. Hello, Leo friends. Welcome to my July 2019 horoscope report for you. Lots of excitement. We've got eclipses. I'm sure you've started to feel those eclipses even before this time. We've got 2 new moons. We have Mercury Retrograde. There's the birthday time that's starting for you all. There's the pre-birthday funk from the planets moving through your 12th house before birthday time. So we have to address how to make the most of that. There are opportunities from networking, from your social scene, connecting with your tribe. You've got continued chances for surprises as it relates to your career, your work, your employment, your home, your family, and your views on life. And for those of you in the teaching professions or doing spiritual work or publishing or writing and things like that, there's also a lot of extra energy, things for using your creativity to just for your own purposes or for your work are continuing to be expanded. Things involving children are continuing to be expanded. And then we've got the topic of your health, massive amount of karmic energy around your health sector. So I'm going to go into lots more details about all of this, along with my suggestions on how to best use the energy. Then we're going to, I'll drop in a Mercury retrograde tutorial, and then after that you'll see me back on the screen for the general transits. So let's look at the Leo charts now. Okay, so we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff that will be the same for early, middle, and late degree Leo placements, but there will be places where we could differentiate out. So I want to let you know where you are in this. Early would be our July born, or 0 to 9 degrees. Middle is around August 1st through 10th, or 10 to 19 degrees. And late Leo is August 11th through the rest of the sign, or 20 to 29 degrees. I often get the question, does this work still, this reading, if Leo is your rising sign or moon? And the answer is yes. Each of those perspectives are windows out of the door of your experience that are equally as valid. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about this month is birthdays. When the sun, you can see at the beginning of the month here it's Cancer, but as we get towards the end of the month, you all are going to start having your birthdays. Actually, let's use the early chart for that because you early ones are going to have it sooner. But what we're about to talk about is going to apply to all of you, and it's just going to be staggered. So it's going to be somewhere between the end of July and the end of August. The sun in the sky will get to the same point in the chart that it was at when you were born. This revolution of the sun, even though we know the sun is not moving around us, our perspective, this is a heliocentric perspective. But when the sun gets back in the sky to the same degree that it was at when you were born, this is called a solar return, and it is very magical. That's where birthday wishes came from, because every planet represents an energy of our expression, and the sun represents desire, want, creativity, creative forces, manifestation power. So when the sun gets back to the same place that it was at when you were born, it opens up a portal for your desires, which is what the wishing comes, the idea of wishing comes from. So birthday wishes are astrological. Definitely look for my video, Making Wishes. If you just search for Making Wishes Annie, I believe it will come up. And that will give you more information on how you can best use this and other power periods to make wishes come true. Also, if you happen to be in or near Sedona, Arizona in August, I am going to have a free event called, it'll be a talk making wishes come true, followed by a book signing. So you can look at my site, anniehelpsyou.com, to see more about that. But in any case, you can find that video to help you to manifest your wishes. Now, if you're watching for your rising sign or moon, you still have extra boosts of rebirth at this time, because when the sun crosses over your ascendant or your moon, it amplifies and brightens up whatever your Leo placement is. So as we have the planets moving through Leo, everything about your life is getting energized this month and next month in a big way. So everything that makes you who you are is seeking to be expanded. So look for lots of opportunities for creative efforts. Those of you who are in any position of leadership or out in front of people, acting, modeling, fashion, athleticism, music, art, anything like that, all of these energies can amplify all of that for you. Let's look at what happens in the weeks before the actual birthday or the weeks before the sun crosses over your rising or moon, because this is important and this is going to take up most of July. So before we have the rebirth, we have the movement of the planets through, especially the sun, through the 12th house. Okay, so you can see full 12th house for early, full 12th house for middle, and full 12th house for late. 12th house is the house of our fears. It's the house of our genetic ancestral memory, karmic records, deep psychological things, and the oneness where we're all connected. When there's a lot of activity, especially the sun, which works as a spotlight, in that space, it can activate fears and activate basically whatever is standing between you and your wishes. So we'll call this like crossover in the first house of like this manifestation, this bursting forward, this creation. And what happens before you get there is this: what's standing in the way between me and the things I want? What are the things I don't want? So I can more readily figure out what it is I do want. All of those things are what we focus on before we get to that wishing point. And this is just a beautiful setup by, Spirit this way, because we get to really think about this. We get to, bust through issues. We get to, have experience with the things we don't want. So we know what we do want. We get to face our fears, basically. And we get to have spiritual breakthroughs. For people who have anxiety issues or are prone to addictions or other mental instability, this time of year can be pretty stressful because it brings more activity to your subconscious mind, which is already a driving force with some of your symptoms and issues. So you may see a flare up in some of your problems when this happens, but it's seeking to resolve it. So, just use the resources, gather your support team, and think about this like the Harry Potter house, which I always do think about it that way. So basically there are all these things outside of him, right? There's a wizard with his wand. And there are all these things outside of him that are scary. It's making him scared. But he comes to realize that all of that is really inside of him, and that if he resolves that, then what's outside of him changes, and then everything is better. So this is how it goes. So this is an amazing time for breakthroughs. This is also a time to find things that are lost. Sometimes that can be literal, and sometimes that can be places that are lost within yourself. You might make major discoveries. I love this time for hypnosis, past life regression, using affirmations and subliminals, anything where you work on your subconscious mind or do inner work instead of avoiding things. Sometimes people will start to party before their birthdays, and this is an unconscious attempt to avoid the issues that are coming up from this 12th house movement. People think that we are, getting anxious about our birthdays because we're getting older and passing of time, and part of that's true, but most of it has to do with this crowding in the 12th house, okay? So as we get to where it's your birthday time or the crossover of the sun to your placements, this 12th house lightens up and all the energy starts to move into the first house of rebirth. So for your early degree placements, that's going to start at the end of the month. For your middle, that'll be more towards the beginning of August. For you late, it's going to be more into August. That's the time frame there. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is Mercury Retrograde. The things that are going on with Mercury retrograde are going to mirror the things that we talked about with the 12th house, because of these things that are going on in the 12th house, Mercury is actually going backwards. So things coming up from the past, issues from the past, opportunities from the past, even clandestine love from the past. I've seen this 12th house be like secret love house, active dream time house, recurring dreams, synchronicities are all more likely at this time. It's a really good time to ask your subconscious mind for solutions to problems. You ask before you go to sleep to be revealed in dream time or upon waking solutions or information you need, or having clarity or seeing what you need to see. You can really utilize this period of time and always. The movement of Uranus for you early degree placements, and for those of you who have work that's related to the 9th house, so teaching, learning, writing, publishing, marketing items of, where you're educating somebody about the use of something, anything having to do with international business or non-geographic business or spiritually based business, international travel, different countries, different cultures, different languages. If your work is in any of those, writing, publishing, any of those fields, then this 10th house Uranus movement, even though for the middle, and you can see middle, okay, so here's the Uranus in the 10th house for the early. Here's Uranus in the middle, middle degree in the 9th house. And here is Uranus way kind of back in the 9th house for the late degree placements. Okay, so you can see even though the 10th house is being accentuated for you early degree placements, the rest of you still have Uranus in the 9th house. But Uranus brings changes and instability. So if you're having a lot of changes or instability, Uranus could be at the root of this. And this can be very exciting. So just things coming out of the blue where, what it always reminds me of, have you ever seen this movie called Enchanted? It's a Disney cartoon movie. It starts out as a cartoon and then it turns into like a not cartoon. But anyway, this princess with her big dress is like going to marry who she thinks is her love. And anyway, a wicked witch says, I am going to send you to a place where there are no happy endings. And she sends her down this hole, and she goes falling through the dimensions, and she pops up through a pothole in New York City. I'm from New York City, so I'm laughing extra hard about this. Okay, so she pops up trying to get her big dress out here in the middle of the street. That's the place where she sent her, New York City, to the place where there are no happy endings. It's so funny. Anyway, but the point is, she is one day in this forest and she's about to marry her love, and then all of a sudden she's through this pothole and she's in New York City in traffic. But of course, everything ends well and she does get her happy ending. But the point is that with Uranus involved and the eclipses involved, these types of changes where you wake up and you're like, what? My life a few minutes ago was just totally different, and now it's changed. And the changes could definitely be for the better. It could be definitely bittersweet, but it's just a volatile time as far as work, movement, your geographical location, brought in by the 4th house here as well. So lots of changes for our Leo friends. And you've already gone through years of changes from the Leo Aquarius eclipse cycle that just recently ended. Jupiter is still making beautiful aspects to the energy of Leo because it's in Sag. It's been in retrograde. It's retrograding through the 5th house for early, the 5th and influencing the 4th for middle. See it there. And pretty much 4th house for late. Some of you late degree placements before Jupiter went into retrograde, you might have had some whispers of Jupiter in the 5th house, and then it just kind of retreated into the 4th house. The expansion can still be going on even while it's in retrograde, but things could be moving slower, or there could be some blocks, or for some of you, the retrograde could be enhancing expansion. It manifests differently for different people. But what it is talking about is your creativity. So everything that we talked about with Leo being expanded from the planets moving through Leo, you're getting that 5th house is the house ruled by Leo. So the singing and the dancing and the acting and the, comedians and the people out in front of people, working with children is another thing. And also having children. If you're a Leo who wants to have a child, Jupiter is definitely going to be helpful in many cases because it expands the energy of children. You may find out there's pregnancy of note while Jupiter's in retrograde, but especially when Jupiter goes direct, which is in August, then things will really start cooking in these fields. Your creativity, if it hasn't been amplified, will be coming back in a huge way. Any work on, having children or with children that you already have could be expanded in a big way. And even you late degree people, even though you're not going to have Jupiter officially in the 5th house for, until later in the year, the 4th house can relate to children and expansion of family through the perspective of expanding home. For you later degree people, the energy of home is being expanded from Jupiter. And like we talked about before, really like the energy of home being expanded for all Leos is happening, but for just different reasons. For the early degrees, you had Uranus affecting the 4th house cusp, and some of you middle degree people would also have that. 4th house cusp relates to home. So surprise changes with home. Then for some of you middle and all of you late degree people, you've got Jupiter working on home. So home, houses, family, some of you might wind up having 2 different homes. I've seen this happen, like where someone either expands their house, or they buy a second home, or they have 2 homes, or they have a home in a different state. Their sense of home expands is basically what's happening there. And that's really happening for all Leos, but for different reasons right now. The last thing that I want to talk about, specific for Leos, has to do with this 6th house. Okay, so we're going to see in the early chart, you've got a massive amount of energy in the 6th house. These are long-term energies too, by the way. They're not passing quickly like these things are. Look at the middle degree, very full. And even you late degree people, it looks like that 6th house is empty. If you didn't know any better or just learning, you'd say, oh, my 6th house isn't being affected. But that's not true, because Pluto, at 22 degrees here, Pluto getting in close proximity. Remember, this planet takes sometimes 240 years or so to move around this whole circle. So when it gets close to something else, it's definitely affecting it. And so this heavy hitter Pluto, even for your late degree people, is starting to affect that 6th house. And the 6th house has to do with pets, so notable things involving pets or animals or working with animals. Your daily routine, the things you do every day. But what I really want to talk about most is your health. A lot of Leos have been tested with their health. So first I want to encourage you to not give up and to keep searching for the answers to resolve your health. For some of you, you may find that a holistic approach may help you have more answers. If you're a person who is already only into the alternative realms, you may have a visit to a mainstream, medical doctor and get blood work. That could be eye-opening for you. So if you're a person out of the mainstream, you may find some answers in the mainstream. If you're a person in the mainstream, you may find some answers in the alternative realm. So basically, expanding your scope of discovery. What I've seen with working with people with various illnesses, and I have done that a lot because of my own health issues I've had in the past, I've attracted a lot of people for health things, and plus also I have a massive background in health, although I'm not a doctor or a licensed medical practitioner. I have a massive amount of history in the medical field, and something that I have seen is that there's an emotional root cause to illnesses. And if you're not looking for that and working with that, then it's going to be hard to clear up these enigmatic things. Okay, so broaden your scope, keep the hope. Things like The Presence Process by Michael Brown, a very deep work to help you get into the source of pain in your body. You know, many people, who, including the author, who have lived in pain as their norm, who have gone in deep with this presence process. It's like $15 on Amazon, so it's totally accessible to everybody. And honestly, I will tell you, I could put together a $10,000 program, and I'm sure people are doing this, that would do what that book does, The Presence Process. But you don't need to do that because you can get the book, The Presence Process by Michael Brown. I call it TPP. And this can assist you. Things like this, even EFT, the Emotional Freedom Technique. These resources can actually help you, along with working with your, licensed practitioners and everyone else, to find answers to these things. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because all of these planets have karmic overtones. And when you're working with a karmic illness, it's not an easy, simple, unifaceted situation. It's very deep, and it often requires, a massive amount of work on multiple levels. And it could be transgenerational healing. This is really a big deal. Okay. So these are the things that are most on my mind for Leos this month. Very powerful time. Now I'm going to drop in the Mercury Retrograde tutorial, which you may be tempted to skip if you're not wanting to learn astrology, but I think it's a good idea for you to watch it because we have Mercury Retrograde for half of our lives, and you will want to make the most of it. Ride with the rhythms instead of against it. So the more you know, the more you can use the energies. Then after that, you'll see me come back on the screen, and I'll talk about the general transits and more of the mood for the month that I think you need to know to best use the energy. Hi, this is going to be a quick tutorial of the energy of Mercury as it relates to the retrograde cycle and the things to keep in mind that are most important to hold in your consciousness as we go through this phase. So the first thing to know is that Mercury is retrograde or in its shadow, pre or post shadow period for about half of the year. So half of our lives we are in this. That's why it's really important to understand it. The second thing to know is that Mercury is retrograde for 3-ish weeks at a time, and there's about a 2-ish week before and after shadow transit. So the pre-transit shadow period and the post-shadow transit period. So all in all, it's about a 7-ish week process. So it is kind of long at a time. And the implications of Mercury retrograde are very strongly seen in this pre-shadow period and especially in the first part of this post-shadow period. And then they tend to linger and just sort of wear off towards the end of that post-shadow period. Mercury rules communication and mobility. So anything involving speaking, writing, communicating, publishing, your devices that you use for communicating, your phones, computers, things like that, your cars, vehicles, walking, your mobility, your capacity to be mobile, your legs, the things that make you able to be mobile. If someone's in a wheelchair, their wheelchair would be there, or whatever it is that is related to your personal mobility. One thing to note as I describe the rest of this is that for people who are born with Mercury retrograde at birth, sometimes they feel the opposite effects of what everybody else feels during a Mercury retrograde period, and that things can flow even better for them during a Mercury retrograde period than when Mercury is direct. So if you have come to notice that, it may be because you have Mercury retrograde at birth. And it also may mean that you have, even if you don't officially have Mercury retrograde, and this is definitely a way more technical thing for you to have to try to figure out, but if Mercury was in a pre or post shadow period close to the retrograde, you could experience having Mercury retrograde from the birth perspective, even though it wouldn't as readily show up on your chart. So that's an important thing to note as well. Okay, so what tends to happen when Mercury's in retrograde is that there are changes to plans. There is uncertainty or confusion about what direction to take. There are plans that were made that are called into question. They may turn out to work out, but they get called into question. Things get called into question. Relationships get called into question. The use of devices and transportation gets called into question. Plans get called into question. And then sometimes they'll work out and sometimes they won't. But this calling into question is a typical Mercury retrograde thing. The topics of travel will often come up, and this can be a fine time for travel. There is a misconception that you shouldn't travel during Mercury retrograde. That's not true. You just have to be more aware because plans tend to change. Gates tend to change at the last minute. Issues with a car tend to come up if you're on a road trip, if you haven't, gotten everything checked out first or whatever, or even sometimes if you did. Impediments to travel, changes. When you're making agreements, Mercury also rules agreements. So if you're agreeing to something, the odds are that you're going to change what you're agreeing to. So it doesn't lend itself as well for long-term or rigid agreements. There are exceptions. If you're in there, don't worry. There are exceptions. But if you are negotiating during Mercury retrograde, you're either not seeing the whole picture, someone is purposely or inadvertently hiding something from you, or there are things that are coming that you're not aware of that are going to change how you can interact in the agreement that you've made. So in general, it is a good idea to be flexible. Flexible, temporary bridge agreements are like the theme that I like to put out there to best use this energy. Let's say you have to negotiate something or you're agreeing to something, and if it's minor or low stakes, you don't have to worry as much. It's the big things, that are more important. But there could be some minor things where it would be helpful to know this. Okay, so keep your flexibility. Try to make a interim or bridge agreement. So like, for instance, let's say you're trying to get a tenant in a house or in a professional space, and Mercury's in retrograde. Something like a month to month, totally awesome to embark on in a Mercury retrograde because you can get out of it. Something like a 3-month lease or even 3 to 6 months, something short term. You can make something for a month and then renegotiate when the planets are more clear, the energy is more clear. So those are ways that I like to deal with the Mercury retrograde. And it's definitely a good time to be aware that you might have things happen to your cars and phones and stuff. In general, I don't love this time as the best time to get a new device or car unless you can help it or unless it's a short-term or interim device. Like let's say you get a temporary phone to bridge you over something, that's more appropriate. Or you get a car that you plan to have for 3 to 6 months. Or, something like that. But for things that you're hoping to keep long-term, the retrogrades tend to make it shorter term. And that's typical. Another place to be careful is launches. Big, awesome, life-changing, once-in-a-lifetime launches are not the ones you want to have when Mercury is in retro. However, let's say you're a teacher and you teach classes twice a year and Mercury retrograde, is the time for your re-enrollment. Re-enrollment is much better supported. But do also expect that when you have launches in a Mercury retrograde cycle, that more people are going to be wishy-washy and there's more of a chance for people that have joined that are going to leave the class. So, it's not always a reliable time frame for trying to get people to commit to things, depending on what the nature of it is. It's hard. Commitments get a little bit more difficult. So basically the things to remember for Mercury retrograde is the flexibility, be extra careful, check your plans, your travel plans and other things and documents and agreements extra carefully. And then anything that has the prefix re, pretty much, there's going to be exceptions to this, but rejuvenation, redoing, re-editing, rethinking, reconsidering, even rest. It's a good time to rest. Anything like that where you're like going back over something is better indicated than something brand new, if possible, unless the new thing is short term or a bridge or something you consider doing, like, oh, I've always wanted to try that. Maybe I'll take that class, and the class is, 6 months or whatever. That can be fine. What we really need to have caution with is the bigger things and the things that are higher stakes, etc. Mercury retrograde can be an amazing time. You can get lots of this stuff done, inspiration from the past, tying up loose ends from the past, and preparing for a nice fertile ground for future wonderful things. I'm calling the theme of July 2019 for all signs, 3 times the manifestation power, bold new directions, and time to be brave. It's always interesting when we have a transit like Mercury retrograde that brings this eye to the past, coinciding with so much potential for new energy. So we've got 2 intense eclipses this month, plus 2 new moons this month. Whenever we have a month with 2 new moons, it opens up more potentials for brilliant new paths, and the same thing with the eclipses. But this is happening all under the cover of this Mercury retrograde. So that means that themes from the past, things worked on in the past, contacts from the past, plans from the past, are all going to factor in very heavily to the new opportunities that come. So we talked at length about Mercury retrograde and where that hit in your chart or will hit in your chart, and also what the implications are there. So we're going to go into some additional things to know about this month. The eclipses obviously are bringing massive changes. The transits this month are pretty equal as far as sweet or challenging, and a lot of them could just really go either way. So when we have a situation where there's a transit that's occurring and someone can either manifest something positive or something challenging from it, it really makes it more important for us to watch how we're looking at things. The perspective that we have on life, the perspective that we have on everything, colors, changes, effects, how we experience things. So the more you can be well rested and positive can help you to frame the energies that come in. And the more present you can be emotionally is also going to flavor this month, because with the eclipses and with the Cancer energies and even with the retrograde energies, there's a massive amount of emotion this month. High emotional tides this month, for better and worse. So amazing culminations, things that you've been hoping for forever, can just come to you at this time. I always think about the eclipse time as the vision of the spider with the web. You've spent all this time until July weaving this beautiful web. And sometimes those webs can get really big. I think about the webs I've seen like in the rainforest in Costa Rica, like, taller than a person, these gigantic webs. And of course the spiders that go along with them are pretty big too. But in any case, this web that you've created, now the eclipse time and the retrograde time are both times to just sit back and see what food comes to you. It's not the best time for initiating something huge, although sometimes chance or other things force it to happen that way. But the more you can be flexible, be relaxed, be well rested, not be super intent on pushing an agenda, being flexible, the more you can observe what is coming to you so that you can strike or take in according to what feels the best with the options that come to you. It's a fine time for research, but it's not the best time necessarily to try to push something to happen. It's more of an acceptance of what's coming in and what you're going to do with it. A lot of the eclipse news and changes may have already taken place before the actual eclipses, which occur this month. So you may already be steeped in, rolling around in, coping with, for better and worse, the eclipse changes. So the Cancer energy is bringing in a lot of emotion, a lot of tilt towards the energy of home, family, housing, home projects, things involving childhood psychology, upbringing, having to take some steps backwards in order to be able to take future steps forward. But there's also a coinciding energy of Leo. And Leo is going to give us the audacity to do something with the opportunities that come to us. Also a zest and a passion and creative expression. So in general, new moons and full moons have power for positive changes and things coming to a head, things coming out into the open, things coming to manifestation. When we have eclipses an eclipse on a new moon or a full moon, it gives us 3 times the manifestation power. So 3 times the new beginnings, 3 times the drama or culmination or, things coming to a head. So it's just definitely a powerful month, very, very, very intense. Intensity is another keynote of this time. As we talked about in the June horoscopes, and definitely if you haven't watched my June horoscopes, you want to do that because I cover the eclipses in detail. There's so much to talk about for this time period. I couldn't fit it all in 1 month. So in June, I go into detail and tell you exactly where the eclipses will hit for you and what manifestations you can see. So definitely rewatch that here in July, even if you watch them in June, so that you can be better poised for understanding the changes that are coming. But in general, the eclipse cycle of Cancer and Capricorn bring in lots of changes to home and family and work and your place out in the world, things with mother and father, and your maternal and paternal energies. Look back to 2009 to 2011 and 2000 to 2001. Those are the times when we experienced this Capricorn Cancer eclipse cycles in the past. So you might see patterns. And I have gotten this question, if those have been your worst times, don't worry, that's not necessarily going to happen again. It's the themes that are brought up that are common to have a continuum. So the areas of life that were a focus, those will likely be a focus at this time. And it doesn't have to manifest the same way that it did. Okay, so I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights here as certain dates to note that are my favorite or my most you have to watch out for. If you want a complete list of the aspects that are occurring and what's involved with those aspects, what planets and signs are at play, and what you can expect from those, definitely sign up for my free email newsletter at anniehelpsyou.com. You'll also get my 28-day virtual coaching program called Shine for free when you sign up for my free email newsletter. Plus, you'll get a written, detailed email newsletter a month before, just like I do the horoscopes a month before, of the dates and the aspects and what to look out for, so you have them for your planning purpose and you get those a month early. So you can see that at anniehelpsyou.com. But we'll hit some highlights here. The new moons are going to be, first the new moon and the solar eclipse, 10 degrees of Cancer, is on July 2nd. So that is a time of major intensity. I do have blogs on my website for how to make the most of each new moon and each full moon in the different signs. So definitely check those out. Mercury is going to go retrograde at 4 degrees of Leo and back to 23 degrees of Cancer. We talked about this at length, but that's occurring on July 7th, and that pretty much goes until July 31st or August 1st, depending on your time zone. The whole month is covered in Mercury retrograde. We've got some challenges to look out for as far as squares and oppositions throughout the month, and you can see the details of that in my newsletter. But one of the things that I most want you to be aware of is the full moon eclipse on July 16th. That is a lunar eclipse, 24 degrees of Capricorn, lots of intensity around that time, things coming to culmination. Be extra careful and also look out for extra rewards and things that you've worked on from the past that can come in a big way. I always try to keep that period of time a little bit light if possible. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but just be extra careful around that time. What they say about the full moons with, crazy things happening is really true. Whenever you watch these mystical shows or like Merlin or whatever, it's always a full moon when these, crazy things go on. So just take note of that and be prepared to deal with whatever comes. The second full moon, or rather the second new moon, is at 8 degrees of Leo, and that's on July 31st, or thereabouts, depending on your time zone. So the second new moon in the calendar month is a black moon, and there's extra power at this time for wishes and new beginnings. So plenty of opportunities for new beginnings. This month is just chock full of them. Throughout the month, we have some challenges with Uranus, we have challenges with Pluto, we have challenges, Pluto, Uranus, kind of a theme there, Saturn. So some of the outer planets are in challenging configurations, and this can bring tests, but it doesn't have to be a be-all, end-all. Often it can bring overstimulation, and that could be a major theme of this month. We could get through this month and have complete positive outcomes and no negativity at all. Certain people will have that experience. Other people will have massive drama and lots of challenges, but there's no one way it has to go. You know, it's wide open here. But understanding the element of the opposition is important because oppositions are pulling us in two different directions. So be prepared to be pulled in two different directions, and also be prepared to be overstimulated. This is going to be an incredibly busy month physically, like moving around, doing stuff. Emotionally, it will be busy. You will be handling things. You might be holding space for other people who are dealing with changes. During eclipse cycles, we'll often see people around us going through massive change, and sometimes we are too. So it's hard to tell at this point if you're going to be a space holder for other people as they go through these big changes, or if you're going to be one of the people going through the big changes, or both. Sometimes in eclipse time, we're going through these big changes and we're also holding space for other people doing that. So be prepared to be overstimulated emotionally and mentally. That's why this theme of just trying to be well rested is really important, because we know that you can't really handle things as well when you're tired. So the more you can be not tired and take your supplements and, you know, do whatever you need to for support, do your walks, do your exercise, you're going to much better be able to use the energies that are present at this time. And there are a lot of sweet aspects in between these challenging ones. So there are some nuisances, but there are lots of sweet things too. Okay, so definitely go to my website, anniehelpsyou.com. I have an extensive astrology blog plus other blogs that you can check out there on different topics. If you resonate with how I teach, you would love to learn, my astrology apprenticeship program is open for enrollment, and I will teach you everything you need to know to do astrology professionally. Or if you just want it for your self-development process, it's amazing for that as well. You can check out all the other kinds of goodies I have on my site, including subliminal recordings that I create for you to help and train your brain to the positive changes that you're trying to make. And you can also see my other professional development courses there. Definitely check out my book, Radical Prayer, Transform Your Life and the World in 28 Days. As I mentioned before, it has become a purse friend. It has become a car friend, a bedtime companion. It's just an amazing book for the spiritual seeker to really help you to use the power of word and prayer and intention to manifest the positive changes you want to see in your life. Check out my husband's website, IamHelios.com. He has amazing options now for you to use audio, subliminal, power-packed, frequency-enhanced recordings to mitigate the negative energies of transits and to enhance the positive energies of astrological transits. So we've worked together in the way of trying to figure out what resources would be best for you based on the things I see in the charts. So you can see the options for audios that can help you to maximize the transit. So you can check that out at IamHelios.com. Also, you can book a live reading at my site, AnnieHelpsYou.com, either with me or my amazing apprentice, Marilee. And you can also book sessions with my husband, B.R. Newman, at IamHelios.com. Okay, so those are the things I most have in mind for you this month. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll see you next month. Bye.